Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Maricel Dicion, Managing Director at Women of Influence Plus, and I'm so glad you're joining us for this conversation because it's an important one. The call for workplace equity hasn't gone away, but the old DEI playbook isn't delivering. Surface level efforts and performative gestures aren't enough, and people are losing trust. That's why I'm thrilled to be joined today by Lily Zheng, strategist, consultant, and best-selling author, to talk about a smarter, more effective path forward, the FAIR framework. Fairness, access, inclusion, and representation. What does it mean to lead with these principles? And what does it actually look like in practice? Before we start, a little bit of housekeeping for our valued attendees today. Please do share your questions in the comments section, and we will try our best to get to as many as we can. Let's get into it. Good morning, Lily. Thank you so much for joining us so early on your time today.
Good morning. I am really happy to be here and looking forward to a fun conversation. Hopefully, a really insightful one for the folks who are joining us here today. And since we only have 30 minutes, I'm hoping we can hit the hard points and, really get through quite a bit of content in a short amount of time as possible.
Well, we're going to try our best, Lily. So let's begin. Let's begin by framing where we are right now. So, what is the core challenge facing workplace equity work today, and how did we get here?
Yeah, I mean, the core challenge is that a good chunk of it doesn't work as well as we'd like it to, right? That's why we're here today. I think, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, first of all, they describe a huge range of different approaches to this work that have been going on for 50, 60 plus years at this point, since the civil rights movement in the US. DEI efforts look completely different around the world in different regions and different companies. And yet, I think a challenge that's been inherent for decades at this point is that despite the good intentions of those doing the work and the leaders who lead it, it doesn't always increase diversity. It doesn't always achieve equity. It doesn't always build inclusion. Oftentimes these efforts stagnate. Oftentimes they plateau. Sometimes they can even create backlash effects that cause the problems that they were designed to fix to get worse. And so I think when I ask myself, right, how we got here today, it's because of a number of factors, right? One is that companies are always interested in doing the bare minimum. That's what I found in the research. That's what I find, talking to clients, right? It's give me the one silver bullet that will fix all my problems. Give me the smallest possible intervention that will solve the biggest possible, range of issues. Give me something fast, give me something quick, give me something convenient. At the same time, I find that, customers, employees, right? We also want things that are giving us a clear signal, a clear sign that things are working. I think there's a great appetite for high visibility efforts. We don't want to just know that things are working, we want to see that things are working. And so that tends to push companies towards things like event programming, that tends to push companies towards things like public statements. These are things that articulate and perform a particular sentiment. And I think a combination of these factors, and then also, the huge variation among DEI practitioners, means that oftentimes we have quite a bit of work that happens that might be high visibility, that might be quick, that might be fast, but might not work. And over time, right, I think this creates real problems for the DEI industry, right? It creates real problems for the companies that we're working with and the nonprofits and the higher education institutions. It causes the communities that we work for as practitioners to lose trust in this work. And ultimately, it makes space for backlash and resistance and pushback to really have ammunition, right? To say like, hey, you're talking about all this stuff, but nothing's changing. And yet, you're forcing us to sit through these trainings and, you use all of this new language, but are you actually fixing problems or are you just causing more?
Mhm.
And that's a question that sometimes practitioners and leaders don't find themselves well prepared to answer.
Lily, what would it take for us to move from performative actions, even though well intentioned, to something that actually delivers meaningful change and
Yeah,
measurable change?
yeah. I mean, that's the question that I asked myself when I started developing this framework because, the like the spoiler is just that like this framework isn't anything completely new, right? There have been folks doing effective DEI work for a long, long, long time, right? Decades and decades. And I found that unfortunately, these are the folks that I believe are in the minority. And so in developing this framework, I tried to pull out across, different sectors, across, private corporations to nonprofits to higher education to NGOs, right? Like what practices work and how can we understand the difference between practices that work and practices that don't? And so the four principles of the FAIR framework, which aren't, by the way, the acronym itself, the acronym describes a set of outcomes that we should work towards, but the principles of FAIR are actually the most important part of that framework, and there are four of them: outcome centered, systems focused, coalition driven, and win-win. Those are the principles that differentiate effective DEI work or FAIR work from the ineffective fluff. And that's what I found in all my practice, looking through the research and working with leaders and working with different kinds of organizations. These practices work. When we center the outcomes we're trying to fix or to achieve, rather than just relying on our good intentions, when we seek to change systems, right? Policies, processes, culture, practices, and not just self-help, not just change individual people and stop there, when we build coalitions, when we say, look, we can't do this work alone, we can't do this work with just one group, clicks aren't enough. When we build coalitions and do genuine organizing to build a critical mass of people in the workplace who want better. And finally, when we rely on the win-win, when we use narratives and communication that says, look, we're building a better world for everyone, we're building a better organization for everyone, instead of leaning into zero-sum rhetoric like, to get more seats for me, I need to take seats away from you, and you're supposed to like it, right?
Mhm.
I think oftentimes a lot of this work can get wrapped up in unnecessary communications and unnecessary narratives that might make the people saying them feel good, but might activate backlash and resentment. Like I saw this again and again and again, especially in the first 5 years of my practice when I would attend workshops, and I would see that probably a third of the workshop attendees would come away feeling really good, feeling really energized, right? These were the folks that came into workshops already getting it. In fact, they probably didn't even need to be there. And yet, a solid two-thirds of workshop attendees would either completely disengage because they felt unsafe, right? Or they felt threatened, or they didn't really feel like they were the folks being talked to, or even come away from the workshop or the event feeling worse, feeling, I mean, more racist, right? More sexist, having more, of these kinds of thoughts and behaviors that we don't necessarily want to see in the workplace. And so these four principles of FAIR, right? Outcomes, systems, coalitions, win-win. This describes the work that's already happening that's succeeding. And I think if we collectively, as DEI practitioners and leaders, want to save, I think, this line of work, we have to make sure all DEI work follows these principles, not just the small minority.
Lily, can we delve deeper into each of these four principles, starting with outcomes? So what does a successful DEI initiative or DEI program, I don't want to distill it down to just one of those words, but for lack of a better phrase right now, what is a successful outcome-based line of thinking look like? How does it manifest in the workplace? What are the
Yeah.
outcomes?
Well, give me any example of a DEI training. Just name something off the top of your head. What's the last DEI training that you attended?
Unconscious bias.
Great. What's the point? What are you trying to fix?
To identify where I may exhibit some unconscious bias that might impact my relationships with colleagues.
Your relationships with your colleagues.
Mhm.
That's the outcome, right? The bias, I mean, I'm about to make people upset. Bias doesn't matter, right? It's what we do with our bias that
Mhm.
matters, because everyone's biased. If you've ever taken an unconscious bias training, you'll quickly learn that everyone's biased. And most good trainings will tell you that you cannot eliminate your bias. No human can. right? We swim in it, right? We're swimming in bias every day. But what we can do is be more conscious about it and to ensure that our bias doesn't affect our relationships with our colleagues, our decision making within organizations, um, our products that we design, our communications that we put out, our meetings that we show up in, our interpersonal behavior. These are all the outcomes. And so when we measure these things, when we say, look, the goal of this bias training or this series or this educational effort, what we're trying to do is to, let's say, strengthen interpersonal relationships, perhaps, right? Or to lower interpersonal discrimination, or to increase fairness of decision making, or to lower microaggressions, or any of these things, right?
Mhm.
Like I can keep on going. These are all outcomes. They're goals, they're results. And unless we measure them, unless we hold ourselves accountable to these things changing, none of our interventions matter. It doesn't matter if 100 people attend your unconscious bias training if you have no idea what success looks like beyond measuring how many people attend your unconscious bias training. Is it working? Is it actually making people's relationships better? Is it making your workplace healthier? Is it making your decision making more fair? Is it making people feel more respected, more safe, more valued, a greater sense of belonging? And if the answer is, well, I sure hope so, but I don't know, then why did you put on the training? Right? We can't be delivering these things with good intentions alone, right? Like imagine applying the same mindset to sales work. Did you convert the client? I don't know, I sure hope so. Right? They're like, why are you making the sales call? Like, what's the point of this team, right? Like, we need to hold ourselves accountable to this work. It's work. It's not charity. It's not good intentions, right? We're trying to shift outcomes. We're trying to fix problems. And so at the bare minimum, we need to understand what success looks like. That's what it means to be outcomes focused.
Thank you so much for that, Lily. I wrote down bias doesn't matter. What you do with it is what matters. And that was just something that's stuck in my head. But you also mentioned prior to saying that is that you may make some folks feel uncomfortable, or maybe what you're saying is controversial. And I think it's because you're pointing out something that perhaps we don't want to see as humans because we're well intentioned in this work. Could that be something that might be blocking us from really getting to the crux of this problem?
Yeah, because we all want to believe that the things we do succeed because we are convicted, like we have passion towards the things we do, right? And as any engineer can tell you, right? Just because you're passionate about the thing you build doesn't mean the thing you build works, right? Like there's a reason why you have to rebuild and fix and reiterate 10 times, 20 times, 50 times. Does it make you a bad person that the first attempt you made at solving a problem doesn't work? No. But oftentimes in the DEI space, sometimes I actually get that feeling, right? People are like, well, I'm super passionate about this cause. And so this is my workshop. And I say, okay, hold on, right? Like we're all passionate about the cause, but there's a difference between workshops that are more effective and workshops that are less effective. Can we talk about perhaps shifting this in a direction that's more effective? And
Mhm.
oftentimes there's resistance, right? It's like, are you questioning my passion? Not at all. Not at all. I'm questioning the execution, right? And when we think about this work, not just as a passion project, but as a, like a serious professional line of work, right? Like we have to bring in quality into it and we have to bring in effectiveness into it. We need to ask ourselves, what does it mean for our work to succeed? What does it mean to get better at our craft? What does it mean to grow as practitioners? And sometimes those questions don't get the answers I think that they deserve, because we can get really caught up in our own feelings about like, well, you know, I need this work. It's so important to me. It has to succeed. It has to work. Right? I remember having conversations with practitioners who were just like, I believe in my heart of hearts that this makes a difference. Like, I have to believe, right? Like, I have to believe that this work is solving racism. And and I talk to these folks, and I'm just like, wouldn't it help if you had clear indications that this work was, solving aspects of racism, right? Like it's not that hard to do a pre and post survey at bare minimum. And I think there's some fear. Like there's
Mhm.
fear that they'll find out that it's not working,
Right.
right? Because then they're just like, then what's the purpose? And that's exactly where I think all practitioners need to start. Like we can't just rely on our good intentions. We have to hold ourselves accountable the same way we talk to leadership. We tell leadership what is it? Intent versus impact, right? Impact matters more than intent. Can we hold that same lens to ourselves?
Oh, thank you for that, Lily. I'm thinking we should have booked way more than 30 minutes with you, but I will try my best to get through the rest. Let's move to systems. Can we elaborate a little bit more about this part of your framework?
Yeah, so it's basically, understanding that the problems are much bigger than people. And when you look at a workplace, right, you look at, I don't know, sexism, big issue, sexism, right? We could probably spend like 20 hours talking about sexism. What is sexism? Well, it's not just individual bias, it's not just individual sexists, it's policies that are biased, right, to punish women. It's practices and processes that punish women, that reward men and masculinity. It's a culture that rewards, let's say, sexist behavior, but punishes women who speak up for themselves, right? Like, sexism is not just people. Sexism is embedded deeply within our shared norms, our standard operating procedures, like even our policies, even our laws, right? And so if we're trying to change sexism, we can't just treat it as a self-help project that individual people can fix in themselves, right? There is no 20-minute lunch and learn reflection exercise that will fix sexism in the workplace. And I could say the same for every other ism, every other major inequality in the workplace. We need change management. We need to fix all of these things together. And oftentimes, I get pushback saying like, well, Lily, one step at a time. Organizations are made of people. If we just, start with the people, we can fix the organization. And to that I say, okay, well, it's been 60 years. I'm still waiting, right? Like, where are the better organizations? And so I think we can't just start from the low-hanging fruit and use that to convince ourselves that we're making progress. We need to understand the problems in their entirety and ask what is the best use of our time and resources to fix things. Because the reality is, if you go to a leader and you say, look, the root of your organization's issues, sexism, racism, ableism, transphobia, right, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, it lies in, let's say, your leadership's intense command and control style that, for example, makes it so that people are scared to speak up, and inequalities that exist among your leaders' biases propagate throughout the organization. You got to fix your leadership. The answer will probably be, could we have everyone do like a 30-minute event and maybe talk a bit about how these issues are big issues instead? Right? We don't really want to fix that big problem. We just want to do the little small thing. The reality is that there's so much appetite for things that don't work, particularly because they don't work, because they're easy, right? And so when I say systems focused, it means we need to really be digging deep into our companies, right? Our organizations, and asking what solves the root cause. And usually that's systems focused interventions. How do we change processes? How do we change culture? How do we change norms? How do we change how leaders engage, how managers engage? And these things are often different interventions than the ones that we see in workplaces, right? Like an event calendar where you have 5 events every quarter is likely not going to fix any of these deep-seated issues. It's just going to give the illusion of progress because there's a lot of activity. But activity is not progress. We need to change systems to see progress.
How does one approach a conversation with leadership, just as you've used as an example here, where you're saying the work that we need to do is much deeper than a lunch and learn and much deeper than another workshop. It needs to be an honest and candid conversation about the systems within this organization that continue to perpetuate this. So from the leader's perspective, or when you approach these leaders, how do you position this as not just one, it's good for your team, but two, it's good for your business to get that sign on, to get that alignment, to get them to say, yes, let's do the hard work?
That's a really good question. I think it starts with actually helping them realize how the status quo is not good for their business. Because very few folks are going to jump at taking on a huge amount of work if I just say like, well, did you know that diversity is correlated with greater innovation and greater productivity? Like they're just like, okay, great, that's nice, but like we have 20 fires right now and I'm busy. And so what we need to do instead is to say, look, I know that you think your status quo is tolerable, but it has so many costs that you don't actually realize, right? We can even talk, in terms of the business. What's your turnover rate of your team? Why is it so high? It's usually high. Why is it so high? Why are you losing people? Why is your engagement so low? Why is your productivity so low? Why are your workers' well-being so impacted? Right? What's going on? What isn't working? And usually, right, you'll get leaders who have some amount of awareness who say like, oh, it's tough. Like there's some difficulties we're having here, right? It's hard to delegate. We're still trying to figure out, you know, which people go into which roles. And you help them understand that these are inherently linked to DEI issues as well, to fair issues. You can't disentangle them, right? Every issue that involves a person is related to DEI, is related to fair, right? We can ask ourselves, could changing the norms of interaction in this team make things better? Could changing your meetings to be healthier and more communicative be better? Could changing, the collaborative culture or the lack thereof in your department make things better? And so what we do is we build a narrative that helps them understand how the status quo is something that they don't want, so that they themselves can come up with that rationale for, oh, I understand. I'm not just fixing a diversity problem somewhere else. I'm using DEI as a means to solve some of these other big issues that I haven't had success in solving.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's how we get that buy-in. That's how we get that intrinsic motivation to do the work. And it's not marketing. Like this is correct, right? Like these issues, every issue that involves people, they're interconnected. You can't talk about people without talking about inequality, power, interpersonal dynamics. And would you look at that? Now we're talking about DEI work, and I didn't even say DEI, right? Like that's how we start solving these issues and get leaders invested.
Incredible. Lily, I'm just mindful of time, so I'd love for us to move to the next two, coalitions. Can we chat about coalitions and how this fits into your framework?
For sure. So, this is not a very surprising one. Yeah, you don't succeed alone. No one succeeds alone, right? In any workplace, change efforts usually start with a small group of internal activists that speak truth to power and say, look, this workplace is terrible. There's a bunch of inequality. There's a bunch of issues. We have to start fixing things. That's the birth of any workplace movement. And yet, for any of these movements to succeed, they have to build a critical mass. They have to engage leaders. They have to engage, entry-level employees. They have to engage people who frankly don't give a damn. They have to start giving a damn, right? Like building these coalitions is how any movement succeeds. And yet I don't see a lot of DEI efforts, right? Or even, internal change making efforts try to build coalitions. I see them stay very, very limited to their cliques. I see them talk in language of interpersonal purity, saying like, well, you got to get it, right? Like you have to be totally in, like you have to totally understand all of these issues. You have to speak the right language. You have to have read the right books. You have to quote the right scholars, right? And I think when we look at the history of grassroots organizing, you see that the most effective efforts are able to broaden their tent and to bring people in and to make it so even if no one speaks the exact same language, even if people don't entirely agree on every issue, they're aligned that change needs to happen, and they're aligned that change might begin by, for example, fixing some aspect of the system, fixing a process, changing a policy, right? And so coalition building is absolutely essential to all of these efforts, and moving past the tendency to stay in our cliques, to stay in our zone of comfort, to push ourselves as leaders and organizers to reach the people that we see as skeptics, to reach the anti-DEI crowd, to reach the folks who are disengaged, not to shame them into participating, but to genuinely ask, what could make this work for you? What issues are you experiencing that might be addressed by some of the work that we're doing? Right? Like that's the work of organizing, that's the work of coalition building, and it absolutely needs to be core to how we think about doing this work.
To the folks that are in the audience right now, Lily, who might be part of a coalition, may want to begin their own in their organization, and then find themselves in a position where they have to cross that bridge and engage someone who has exhibited anti-DEI, thoughts or expressions, or someone they need to win to even have the conversation. What advice from a high level would you give to these audience members to engage the proverbial other side?
Yeah. Um, really ground yourself before you engage in that conversation. Like, it's work. Like, it's genuine work. Like, there's a reason why, like, there are entire degree programs focused on building that facilitation skill and, emotional regulation and active listening and all of these kinds of skills and engaging difference and also managing our own intense discomfort, right? Sometimes I have to check in with myself and realize that I'm not actually in a good space to have that conversation on that day. I need to wait till I am. Or maybe it's someone else that needs to have that conversation because I just can't engage with that person because of how they engage with me. We need to be right with ourselves, right? We need to center ourselves. And also, we need to realize that part of recognizing coalition is recognizing that we don't have to do everything ourselves. We need to have colleagues who we trust to do this work, even if it feels like we're working alone, especially if it feels like we're working alone, right? This is where allyship comes into it, but not allyship in a abstract, feel good, vague sense, right? It's not just like, oh, I support you, I'm an ally. No, like, we're building coalition. If you support this work, you have a job to do. This is the job, right? Like let's get this stuff done together. Let's build together. I need you to do this. I'm going to do that, right? And that's the kind of consideration we need to make as we engage in these kinds of conversations.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Lily. I'm cognizant we have 3 more minutes now.
I know, and the last one's pretty difficult, but I'll do my best to get through it quickly.
Yes, it's the win-win, right?
Yeah, so win-win really, it connects to that last one, right? We need to help people understand how our work helps them. And yeah, that means shifting our conversation on DEI from who deserves change, right? Who deserves better, to everybody deserves better. And by centering the most marginalized, that's how we create it. It's a small shift, right? It's a small shift, but I think it helps engage those that are on the sidelines who have felt overwhelmingly. Study after study shows that, disengaged, for example, white men. I think there was a study that showed that 70% of white men feel like DEI efforts don't need them or don't want them, which is ironic because they hold so much power in organizations, right? But there's this pervasive sense that DEI efforts are not, they don't want anything to do with these folks, or if they do, it's only to punish them, right? Or to make them reflect on their privilege, which is a very positive way of saying, like, we don't want anything to do with you. You should feel bad about yourself. I think we instead need to flip the script and say, how can we make everyone feel like by engaging in this work and by building a better organization, they win too? Of course, our core consideration is ending inequity, right? Is ending these negative experiences, ending discrimination, building thriving for everyone. And we need to help those people who have felt disconnected from this work, right? Not only cisgender heterosexual white people, but disengaged folks from all backgrounds and all identities feel like this work is for them and will benefit them. You don't have to be an activist to benefit from DEI. You don't have to be participating in every event to benefit from DEI. If you have ever been in a meeting, healthier meetings will benefit you. If you've ever used a product, more inclusive products will benefit you. If you've ever received an email, more respectful communication will benefit you. Like, there's so many ways we can talk about this work in terms of universal benefit, all the while focusing on solving, right, these inequities in the organization that affect very specific groups most heavily. But we can communicate as if they help everyone, because they do. They genuinely do. And by using that language, we can build that broad tent that I talked about in coalition building.
Lily, can I squeeze one last question here?
Oh yeah, go
I'll
for
make
it.
it super short. Okay. As someone who is deeply embedded in this work, what is giving you hope right now as the work changes and transforms and transforms, I'll stick with that, into its next iteration?
Well, I think you've already said it. Like, the work is transforming as we speak, right? I didn't make the FAIR framework as a sort of cynical, like, nobody's doing this, and so I really wish someone would. No, it's the opposite. There are lots of people that are doing this work already. Like, the FAIR framework is a call to action for everybody who has ever felt like the work could have been better, to recognize that it's already happening. It's happening right now. I'm seeing it happen in the client orgs that I work with. You can do it. We're all already already starting to make these changes, right? I think this is the next stage. This is the next step for its work, for this work. And frankly, people don't like to admit it right now because it kind of feels very doom and gloom in this industry. I'm talking to a lot of folks that are weirdly excited. And I think that's a strange thing to say in this time, right? But I'm talking to a lot of folks who are weirdly excited, saying like, okay, I wish it wasn't for this horrible reason, but the work is evolving in a way that I've never seen interest in evolving in the last 5 years. The work is becoming more accountable. The work is becoming more outcomes driven, systems focused, right? Coalition built, win-win. The work is changing. And I think we're all a part of it. We can continue to be a part of it. For those who are tuning in, right? Like, I hope you take away, you can do this. You can do this too. We are going to get through this and the work will be stronger for it.
Lily, what a great way to end this discussion. Thank you for this candid conversation. Thank you for the work that you do and for sharing your insights. I feel inspired. And there's a lot that I've taken away, and I hope that our audience has as well. Lily, if it's okay with you, I will pop your LinkedIn profile in the comments section along with a link to your latest book, if that's all right.
For sure.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Lily, for joining us, and to the Women of Influence Plus community. Thank you, as always, for joining us. We'll see you in a couple of weeks for our next one. Take care.
Take care, everyone.